It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
It's Take Command and In the Huddle crossover episode from Odyssey Sports. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening right now. All right, let's do this. Let's all pick one player quickly, like 60 to 90 seconds apiece. Players that we think will shape the draft. Someone who, hey, when this guy goes, it's going to help shape how everything goes after him. Could be one of the quarterbacks. Could be, a player that maybe is drafted above what his position value truly is. Someone else who's just got your eye in this draft that you think is going to shape specifically the first round. Of course, worth mentioning here that Baldy and JLC will be hosting our draft show for Odyssey. You can watch that on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page and on Twitch. Logan, I'll start with you. Who's the guy that you think is going to shape the first round of the NFL draft? I'll give you first crack at it.
I mean, this is cheating because it's so obvious, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that if Bryce Young goes number one and the Houston Texans are not sold on C.J. Stroud, that's going to make one of those quarterbacks fall, Will Levis or C.J. Stroud, right? Because if C.J. Stroud is the consensus number two, Houston doesn't take him, Arizona doesn't take him, let's say Indianapolis takes him, then Will Levis is on a skid. Anthony Richardson hasn't been selected yet. So as much as that's like a boring thing to say, like that first pick is going to be demonstratively dramatic in terms of the effect of the top 10 and where those quarterbacks fall. And it could lead to a situation where, a really good football player potentially slides down into that kind of mid-20 range and the team gets really excited. So, that's kind of the most boring one, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that first pick is very significant.
Yeah, and there's been some rumors that Houston might not actually go quarterback at two.
Right.
That they might sit out a year and try to get in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes next year. So that becomes super interesting if the guy that they don't like winds up falling. It seems like Bryce Young's headed to Carolina, but we'll see. All right, Baldy, who's the guy for you that shapes the first round?
Well, I got to believe Jalen Carter, at this point, because, like Jeffrey Simmons just got a $100 million deal in Tennessee last week, and rightfully so. I mean, he's been a dominant defensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans, and they've been the top defensive front in football at the very top over the last 3 years with him in there. And if you look at Jalen Carter, to me, he looks like a bigger, more athletic Jeffrey Simmons. So, obviously there's these issues off the field, and we don't need to go into any of it. But there's also a question of just his production at Georgia. And, his 3.5 sacks, anything to get excited about. Georgia runs a crazy system. Kirby Smart's smarter than all of us together. So I can't dispute what he does when you win back-to-back national championships. But, Jalen Carter could easily go number 3 to Arizona. There's no J.J. Watt. That would be a steal. If Indianapolis makes a trade with Houston and they lose to Forrest Buckner, they need somebody in the middle. If Seattle wants to be a Pete Carroll-built team, like they don't look any further than Jalen Carter. Like Detroit is on the upcome. They won 8 of their last 10 last year. You add Jalen Carter in there with Aiden Hutchinson and what they have, they get a whole lot better. I mean, you just go through the list. I mean, the Raiders have nobody to help out Max Crosby inside. The Atlanta Falcons, they've been adding defensive pieces and, different guys, Calais Campbell, but there's nobody like Jalen Carter on that lineup. So you could just go team by team and go, he helps that team right away, having a beast like that in the middle. So to me, does he drop? Doesn't he drop? Where's he go? All that, I think, is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear everyone else's selection, but I wanted to ask you, Baldy, removing the legal stuff, the thing that gets me a little bit concerned about him is the work ethic stuff.
Yeah.
How do you weigh that? How do you weigh the risk of that, especially given, like you mentioned, he's a very special football player, very, very physically gifted, but I want to bet on a guy that's going to work, and I want to get your thoughts on that. Yeah.
So, 320-pound guys typically don't play every snap, like your defensive ends or your linebackers. So they're not that worried about making plays on the other side of the field. I'd like to see more effort. He couldn't finish his pro day. Like he just was gassed. Now, there's extenuating
a lot of stuff.
There's really no excuse for that. It's embarrassing. I hope he's not Albert Hainsworth. I hope he's more Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones, Javon Hargrave. than what we saw from Haynesworth and what you saw from Haynesworth back in the day. But, that's why there could be a drop, because somebody's saying like, man, I need a better motor, because ultimately all you want in all these draft visits, all these, all the things that we do over 4 months is you just want to find, like, does that guy's heart, is it all about football? And if it is, then he'll get in shape, he'll play to his talent. But if it isn't, you're going to have a problem on your hand.
That's why Detroit's one of my favorite landing spots for him. Like, get him in a room with Aiden Hutchinson, and let's see what happens. Because that dude's motor is...
Peer pressure is important.
Yeah.
Like, that happens.
Dan Campbell.
You want to play as hard as Aiden Hutchinson, or you want to look like... You know what it's like, Logan, being in that film room on Monday. You don't want to be that dog that everybody's looking at. You want to be that guy that is playing harder than everybody else.
Yeah. All right, Jason, your player that's going to shape the first round. Who you got?
Well, I'm going to go at it a little differently. I'm going to say two teams clustered together because I think they're wild cards. And I'm with you guys. I think Jalen Carter could be the first defensive player off the board. You can get pretty good odds on that if you're into wagering on such things. And I don't think he gets past Seattle, which means maybe Anderson falls a little bit because the high-end projection, the people I talk to, that I think he's he's a good football player. Is he going to be a great football player?
Right.
But I just keep coming back to Atlanta and the Raiders clustered together. Like, are we really buying that 85-year-old Arthur Blank is completely sold on Desmond Ridder? Like, don't they protest too much about how much they love Desmond Ridder? Because I'm old enough to remember them not playing him till they absolutely had to a year ago. They rode Marcus Mariota, who really liked their backup quarterback, would have ridden him. But now he's the solution. Okay. They've passed on a lot of quarterbacks. And I can understand Arthur Blank $50 million a year, but you don't want to take a flyer on one of these kids at $5 million a year? Because that's what Lamar cost his first 5 years, $33 million, $6 a year, right? So I'm not buying that they're in on a quarterback. And the same thing with the Raiders. Josh McDaniel, best way for him to buy himself a little more time from the owner and the fans, because he's already on the hot seat, is to take a quarterback, right? I mean, what else hope more than a first-round quarterback? He's one like Anthony Richardson, who, guess what's baked into the cake? Oh, I'm going to get a few years in all likelihood, right? Like, they've got so many holes. But quarterbacks got to be, like, is anybody buying Jimmy Garoppolo playing more than 10 games this year? If just one of those teams, right, if does one of those teams jump to 2 or jump to 3, all of a sudden to get a quarterback?
It's a really interesting thought, because it does seem like things always like that happen. Like, some team does something that you're not expecting, and so we'll see if that's one of the two teams. I'll say for me, the Richardson, and I'll count, like, in a way, I guess Jason's player is Richardson, and take him off the board for myself. My guy's Bijan Robinson, because he might be the best football player in the draft, but he plays a position that you don't take in the first round unless a guy's really special. But I know I had Eric Edholm from NFL Media, a guy we all know, on my show yesterday, and he's probably my favorite player in the draft. And if he's going to be LaDainian Tomlinson, that seems like someone that's worth taking in the first round. And could you see a team, by the way, Jason, like Atlanta, who wants to run the football more than anything else, take him in the top 10? You could also see him fall into the 20s. You could see him fall out of the first round. And so he's, if he, let's say, goes to Atlanta.
Oh, no, you can't. I'm not buying that.
I doubt he falls out of the first round, but he could fall into the 20s.
No
he could
way.
fall into the 20s. And from there, who knows? But
Maybe.
Bigger point is, like, if he goes 7 to it or 8 to Atlanta, where everyone's mocking Christian Gonzalez, that bumps all the corners down. Like, that reshapes the draft in a way that is really significant. So to me, Bijan's the guy that is the biggest wild card probably in this draft, because he could shift every other position group, because you never account for a running back in the top half of the first round.
Wait
go
a
ahead,
second.
Logan.
So I just want to ask, so Jason, you don't see there's any way that he falls out of the first round? No way at all?
I'll just speak for Jason.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe, Logan, that he could ever get past Dallas at 26.
Right.
Like, that's such a Dallas pick at 26. Howard's coming off a broken foot. Zeke's not there. McCarthy has come out and said, I want to run the ball more and better than we did a year ago.
Right.
Like, he's the perfect fit in that offense, which is a star-studded built team led by, Micah, Dak, CD, like you'd add Bijan to that, like Jerry Jones' head is going to pop off.
By the way, went to Texas, so he's a Texas guy.
Right.
Star power added there.
I just was thinking, from an analytics perspective, there are, I'd say, I don't know, probably 15 teams that I spoke with at the Combine that were basically like, we won't take a running back in the first round no matter what. But I guess, like you've talked about on your podcast before, you just need one team. And I do think that, Dallas would die if that happens. So that's a great point.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.